themselves simple questions like, you know, even if it's something from the most mundane thing, like, do I feel hungry right now? What do I need in this moment to make myself feel better? Am I thirsty? And then getting more deep, right? Like when women are going out on dates with someone and they're confused about what to do, I ask them, like, how do you feel in that person's presence on that date? Are they actually making you feel safe on that date? And so really just asking that question to themselves, putting their hand in their body and then waiting for the response allows them to reconnect with their body and not just be in their mind about it. So just making that connection and asking yourself those questions.
Yeah, like taking time to just actually check in with yourself. Like it's kind of like with children, you know, if they were running around and you are taking care of them, so you're going to ask them, are you hungry? Do you need anything?
Audio Jungle.
Hannah, she is getting mentored, I believe, by Scarlett de la Torre, and for like sound.
Nice.
And so she's been sharing all about, you know, her journey or sharing her page. And, you know, in our course, we talk a lot about like the power of sharing and just sharing things that really truly align with you. And so I went down a rabbit hole on her page, came across one of her videos and was listening to it. It must have been a live stream that she was doing and put the recording on. And she was like, oh, hi, Christine. She's like, if y'all haven't read her book yet, I Am Diosa, I need to read it. And then she's sharing how she like met y'all in Puerto Rico. And like literally my ears went ding, ding, ding.
Yes.
Like, it was like my soul was like, okay, Google, stop what you're doing. Stop listening to this video. Go and Google what this book is. So I look it up. My husband buys it for me. I find you on Instagram and I'm like, oh my gosh, I love everything that she represents. I love everything that she posts. She's a healer. She's a therapist. She's doing like all these things, retreats. She's in Puerto Rico. Like I'm originally from Puerto Rico. So I was just like, who is this woman? And then I saw that you were following me and I'm like, how did I not see this? So I instantly, I DM'd her.
I didn't even notice.
Yeah, I DM'd her. I was like, how am I just finding your page? I cannot wait to dig into this book. I just started it like Thursday or Friday. I'm already almost done with it. Like everything that the women in our community are learning about and embodying is everything that you represent and everything that you've been writing. So ladies, today I have Christine Gutierrez, who is the #1 best-selling author of I Am Diosa. And it is a healing, you know, deep healing book that's helping you come back to your soul, you know? And so today I have her on here. She is a Latina spiritual therapist and has retreats in Puerto Rico, Bali. Girl, I did all my research. I started watching all your videos. So today I want her to share all about who she is, her book, and why you need to read it because I was glued to it. So without further ado, we have Christine Gutierrez, aka Cosmic Christine on Instagram, and share with us like how this came to life. How did you birth this? What does Diosa mean? And just tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I love synchronistic stories where, you know, people mention, and that's how we're led to, you know, I believe our teachers, our guides, and also just our community, right? Like we grow when we share. And so I am totally in that, something that I do as well with my entire Diosa brand is really based around making sure that we are helping one another to grow and really working from this abundance mentality versus like a scarcity mentality. So I love that that's how we all connected. And originally we met Scarlett, I know she told you, but my husband synchronistically got a client and that client knew Scarlett, and then we all kind of connected. And so everything just happens that way, right? And so, yeah, a little bit about myself. So I grew up in Brooklyn and in Queens in New York. And so I'm Nuyorican. And really from as young as I can remember, I always had some sort of inkling that I was meant to heal and help people that were suffering, help people that were in pain. I always felt really connected to human suffering. And anytime that I saw a person sad or a homeless person or just anyone in pain, my heart literally felt connected to them. And immediately I knew that we are not separate from, you know, others, that that we are connected. And so there was this really like big heart that never went away, and that really was tortured by all the suffering. And I knew that I had to do something with that pain. And so the best thing we can do when we feel connected to human suffering is ask ourselves how we can be of service. How can we make a change? And so I kept on listening to that inner voice that said, you're meant to help, you're meant to heal. I inevitably went through my own struggles that reconfirmed, okay, I need to do this healing work for myself and help others. So it became not only helping others, but also helping myself to heal from my own childhood trauma, from my own anxiety, from my own panic attacks, etc. And so it became personal in addition to like this worldly passion and calling. This is really my sole purpose, to help alleviate suffering and to give people tools that are spiritual and psychologically grounded. Like you said, I have a background as a licensed therapist, but I incorporate ancient healing modalities and different spiritual tools that are helpful for people, that people can really take with them and really start to implement in their everyday life.
Absolutely. When did you realize like cause I always feel like, people like you were an empath from the get-go, but when did you realize that you had trauma? Were you just like, oh, I need to like fix myself? Or were you in school and you were inspired? Was there anybody that kind of led you to this journey of like, being like, okay,
I knew when I was a kid. I knew when I was a kid, and I was very outspoken. I was like, you're not parenting me correct. Like I joked that I was like a baby therapist, because I believe that most kids know, because we intuitively know what feels good and what doesn't. And we intuitively know, like, if someone's not speaking to you in a way that's like loving, it hurts. So I knew that something was off, and I remember speaking up on it. And again, I had both love and trauma in my life. It wasn't like my parents were just like these shitty people. They weren't. It was complex. Like many family stories are complex, right? It's not just black and white. We exist in like this gray area. And so I knew that like this was affecting me. And then especially as a teenager, I realized that this is not my self-esteem, and in the patterns that I had in even those, mini relationships, with friendships, with the relationship with myself, and then of course relationships that were romantic as I got older. And so usually there's some sort of intuitive knowing that something's not right, that some way that you're being treated is not right. And then you see those consequences, if you ignore it long enough, in the fact that you are seeing your behaviors with hurting yourself or acting out or numbing yourself in some way to kind of cope with that feeling.
Absolutely. I went through so many years where I didn't know that I was numbing. I didn't know that I was running away from, my soul and stuff. So going back to the book or whatever, what made you call it Diosa? And tell us a little bit, what is about the soul and the soul call? Like, what exactly is that? We have women that are now starting to kind of get into their spirituality, and not just like doing the therapy, but also like looking into spirituality as the healing modality too. So what is Diosa, and what was your intention with the book? And what do you mean by like soul and soul call? I know those are like 3 questions, but bear with me.
So for those that don't know what the word Diosa means, Diosa is the Spanish word for goddess. And so I also knew that there was something missing. I grew up Catholic, not really religious, but I went to Catholic school my whole life, and then Jesuit college. I went to Fordham University for my undergrad. So there was this presence of like spirituality, and I always was attracted to it in some way or another. I liked some parts of the prayers. I enjoyed, the ritual of it, but I was very rebellious. And I remember, speaking up in class and telling, the teachers, like, this doesn't make sense, but what if a kid is born in another country and they don't know these exact things? I don't believe in a God that, punishes people for not believing the same things. Like, it just seems like that's their culture. So something, again, that was in me that knew something's missing. And I went on strike once in my bedroom. I forget, I was like 10, 11, around that age, right? I was still living with my mom, so I wasn't a teenager yet, middle school age. And I remember saying, I'm no longer going to pray the Our Father. Let me just move my seat. I'm no longer going to pray the Our Father. I'm only going to pray Hail Marys, because I wanted to only represent the aspect of the feminine because I got tired of the fact that it was all like male dominated. So this was my first inkling that like the divine feminine was missing from church, right? Like that was my little way of going on strike and being like, you know, F the Our Father, I'm only going to do Hail Marys because she's a girl. And so that, again, that desire to have a feminine face of the divine led me to, you know, subconsciously probably, but seeking spirituality that incorporated the feminine. Why? Because we need to have an archetype that allows us to know that we are divine too. And so if we only hear God the Father, and we don't hear Goddess the Mother, then we are, it's not balanced. And so therefore we don't see ourselves fully as divine. And so part of I Am Diosa is saying I am divine, I am goddess, right? I'm a piece of that that bigger puzzle. And so I was led to studying different healing modalities, some of them which include, you know, shamanism, tantra, priestess work, and goddess worship, right? Understanding the archetypes of different goddesses around the world and getting really connected to the divine feminine within myself. And when I started to do that, I started to feel more empowered and walk away from toxic behaviors little by little, right? We're always peeling back layers and always doing the work, but
We're always
it
healing.
started to make a direct impact. Always,
Yeah.
always. And that's like, we're in earth school, right? Like that's the point of why we're here, is to learn. So, you know, I don't think that anyone should be discouraged at no matter what age we are. We're always learning. We're always students. And so it changed my life, and I started to incorporate that in my teachings. And so it was hard to name it I Am Diosa at first because like many of us that are, you know, this is a very white, this personal development market was a very white market, meaning there were very few Latina authors in the mainstream market, very few POC authors in the mainstream market. And so for me, I was scared. Why? Because I too fall victim to like this colonized version of like, oh my God, what if, you know, what if I name it this and no one resonates with it because I'm using the word diosa? What if there's, you know, Latina women that don't speak Spanish, that don't know what the word diosa is? But even if you don't know the word diosa, right, I am is already such a powerful statement. And then you're saying diosa and it feels beautiful, right? It has the word dios in it. And
Yeah.
most people know what that means. And so it was like a struggle back and forth with my cultural identity and really owning my cultural confidence and saying, yes, I am Latina. I'm super proud to be Latina. I'm so excited that I got this major book deal with, you know, one of, you know, the top publishers in the world. And I had really loving people by my side encouraging me. My husband, my book agent, and the publishers. They were all like, everything you do is Diosa Retreat. Everything you do is I Am Diosa. It makes sense to name it that. The first original title, the working title of my original book proposal was The Soul Call. And so I talk about the soul call in the book, but the book felt like this is I Am Diosa. This is the body of work that I want to launch into the world. So it was a journey to
Roll
get there,
call
but I'm
is
really
under that
proud of where we
umbrella,
landed.
right? It's under the umbrella of
Exactly,
Diosa.
exactly,
So for girls, women
exactly.
that are new to all of this, what do you mean by the divine feminine? And you know, I was going to ask you if you ever get imposter syndrome, but I felt like you were kind of like saying like, I was scared to call it that. And I love that you share that because
Yeah.
that's so important. You know, we look at someone that has already, you know, published something and doing big things as like, oh my gosh, like, does she experience this, you know? So what is the divine feminine? What, like, how do you embody that?
Yeah, I think the first step is just knowing that the divine feminine exists, right? Like if we don't know something exists in anything, it's hard for you to call it in, work with that energy. Same thing for why representation is so important, because if we don't see someone doing something, it's really hard for us to just manifest it out of thin air. It's helpful to have these archetypes. So for anyone that's starting, accepting that there is this presence of the divine feminine, right? It's the mother energy, it's the earth, right? It's the fact that you can plant a seed and something grows from it. And so there's this balance of this feminine masculine energy, right? Where there's a sun and the moon, where there's this inhale and exhale. in Tantra, when we're learning about this union of Shiva Shakti, or this union of the feminine and masculine coming together, we talk about just even how the breath represents this in and out, which is like this sexual union of the feminine and the masculine. And something that I mentioned in my book is that this doesn't belong to a specific gender or sexual orientation. We use these words, but this exists beyond the words. It's just an embodiment of that. And we all hold those energies within us, whether we're straight, gay, bi, trans, man or woman, we still hold this feminine, masculine within us. And so the second thing is to start invoking. And if in my book, there are certain parts of the book where you're just getting to know yourself, and you're doing exercises where you're looking at yourself and you're adorning yourself as goddess, and you're doing rituals, and maybe you place a little bit of honey and flowers on your body, or maybe it's just, doing a simple prayer. Divine feminine, Diosa, I invite you into my life, guide me. But it's just a simple willingness that opens the doors to that connection to the divine feminine.
I love that. And I love that you, in the book, you mention a lot, like it's not, you could be a male or a female listening to this, because we all have these energies, and I feel like the last couple of years I've been learning so much about the feminine, but then forgetting about the divine masculine too, and knowing that it's okay to embody both.
It's a balance.
So yeah, having the balance. So what is the soul call?
Yeah. So for me, that soul call is that ancient voice that kind of lives within you, that pulls you towards your highest evolution of self, your highest growth. And so I believe that we all have this soul voice inside of us, and some of us have it like whispering, and some of us have it yelling sometimes, and some of us have ignored it or pushed it down or suffocated it under, drinking too much, fucking too much, or, numbing ourselves by closing ourselves off to the world, right? Like living on those extremes, that sometimes we forget that there's that guidance, that inner guidance system of the soul that has always been and always will be. And this voice, I believe, is the voice that orients us towards the version of us that we're meant to be. And the more connected we are to listening to this soul voice, the more connected we are to connecting to our highest version of our destiny, the highest level that we can possibly have, right? And we have many different destiny paths, but it's like the more we listen to that voice, the more we show up to do the work and heal those areas that need love and healing, the more access we get to the vision of what our soul wants us to be.
Yeah, like the more you trust it, the more it starts coming to you too. How do you, whenever I first started just looking inward and healing, I was just like, oh my gosh, like how do I develop intuition or my soul? Like how do I connect? Like, because I was so disconnected and I wasn't in my feelings. So what would you say for someone that is in that, like, okay, I have been running away. I want to like face all this stuff. How do they start? How do they start tapping in,
I think
listening to their soul?
One of the things is recognizing that you have disconnected from your intuition or your soul, and just simply naming that out loud first and foremost, and saying, I feel like I'm disconnected from myself. Maybe you don't even want to call it your soul, at first. Maybe that's too much of a kind of like too scary for you, right? And so maybe you just want to start by saying, I disconnected from myself. I've disconnected from my truth. I've disconnected from my desire, disconnected from my gut. And then after owning that it's not that you've disconnected, the second part of that is then being willing to say, I am willing to start connecting again. I'm willing to open up myself to being able to make room for quiet so that I can hear that voice, right? And the next thing is really looking at what you know for sure doesn't work. So one of the things, like when I was working with a lot of women that were in abusive relationships or, just really disconnected, right? Like they were just like going nonstop, just trying to survive and just totally disconnected. And one of the things I would ask them is, what do you know for sure? Like, what do you know for sure? How do you feel right now? And they would say, well, I'm burnt out, or I'm scared, or I'm tired. And I'm like, okay, cool. So you know something for sure. Your intuition knows for sure that you're burnt out and that you're tired. And so like validating that to them and starting with reminding them that actually they do know something. They're not as lost as they think. And then from there, asking themselves simple questions like, even if it's something from the most mundane thing, like, do I feel hungry right now? What do I need in this moment to make myself feel better? Am I thirsty? And then getting more deep, right? Like when women are going out on dates with someone and they're confused about what to do, I ask them, like, how do you feel in that person's presence on that date? Are they actually making you feel safe on that date? And so really just asking that question to themselves, putting their hand in their body and then waiting for the response allows them to reconnect with their body and not just be in their mind about it. So just making that connection and asking yourself those questions.
Yeah, like taking time to just actually check in with yourself. Like it's kind of like with children, if they were
Yeah.
running around and you are taking care of them, so you're going to ask them, "Are you hungry? Do you need anything?" I remember back in the day I used to do fitness competitions and do extreme dieting, and I had to like reprogram myself to learn how to like eat because I was actually hungry. And then I remember someone saying,
Yes.
"Try intuitive eating." And I'm like, "What is that?" And it's so funny how like now like realizing how much I've already kind of been tapping into my intuition unknowingly, even though it's called intuitive eating. So it was like, okay, instead of just grabbing something out of habit, is just simply ask yourself, do I feel hungry? Do I feel thirsty? Do I need this? So those simple questions I feel like go
Do
a
I
long
need
way.
love? Do I need a
Yeah.
comfort? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Checking
I
in.
love, I love that analogy that you gave with the child, right? Because in a way we are learning to nurture our inner child again. So you are literally asking yourself these questions to reparent yourself in some ways. So that's a great analogy.
Yeah. It's crazy because like, as I've been getting into this, like, personal development, I feel like is so broad, but like looking inward, wellness, personal development, I feel like you are learning about parenting and your inner child. And I'm like, what does that even mean? So think of, yourself, your soul, like you are still that little child and you need to, ask yourself and take care of yourself, reparent yourself. So,
Yeah.
what are things that people can do to practice connecting with their intuition besides just checking in? Like, do you have meditation? Is it just, doing less? Like what are other things that they can do?
Yeah, I think prayer and meditation is a great way to start activating that relationship. Just like with any relationship, you need to make time for it, right? If you want to have a better relationship with your partner, you need to make time. You need to have that sacred connection time. So I like to think of it as like your soul time. And even in my calendar, I have literally a reminder that says connect to your soul. And it could be something as simple as lighting a candle and taking 2 seconds, where literally 2 seconds where you just set the intention of like, I'm connecting with me right now. This is my sacred time. And I tell people, especially for busy people, take a couple of minutes in the shower. It's a great space to just be alone. And I know a lot of people complain, meditation is hard, it's boring. Like I have meditations on my website that are guided meditations. There's apps that I'm on as well, Simple Habit. So you can have guided meditations now that make it easier. But even if that's too hard, just play some of your favorite beautiful music and take a shower. And that's your soul time. And that's your time to really check in with yourself and ground yourself. And there's other practices that you can do. There's this cool exercise that I included in the book as well, but you can, if you're really struggling, you can ask yourself a question. You could say, what is it, heads or tails? And you call it, like you ask the question, you call it, and before it flips on either heads or tails, you ask yourself, what am I wanting it to fall on? Right? What am I wanting it to fall on? Because whatever you're wanting it to fall on is usually what your actually intuition is saying to you. And so sometimes we end up looking at these exterior things, like, people go to psychics, or they're doing all these things because really they're just disconnected from themselves, and they want to know answers. They want to figure it out. But I believe that we have all the answers that we need within them. And sometimes it's just not the right timing, or sometimes we're just too busy. So simple practices are always best for me. I've never been a very fancy, I never meditate all the time. That's just not my personality. I'm not into, you know, having a strict routine. It's just not me. I just connect in very simple ways. And so I like to teach people that it's not that hard. Light a candle, take a shower, and ask your soul, what do you need me to know? What do you want me to do today? What are the areas of my life that I don't want to see, that I need to look at so that I can heal, right? Like that's a wonderful prayer, because we're often praying for what we want instead of what are we not looking at, right? Like, help me to see what I'm not looking at so that I can heal it.
That's such a great question. And I like that you even talk about, this isn't just like a law of attraction, ungrounded spirituality. Like there's going to be, it's messy, it's raw.
Yes.
Like sometimes when you're like the questions you want to avoid. And like, you know, I used to be very much like this, like the toxic positivity and always just trying to find like the running. It was just trying to find all the positive ways and, you know, not dealing with the inner pain that I was carrying, you know?
Yes.
So that was, I actually enjoyed reading that in the book. And I actually just finished reading about the heads or tail, and like you saying that if there's a discrepancy or whatever, then that's telling you right there, you know?
Yeah.
I love that you also say you don't have to do everything every day. I see, you know, someone like you doing all these amazing things. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to know what her ritual is. Is there like a non-negotiable for you? So you just make sure that you're taking care of yourself. You are mindful, you are checking in, but it doesn't have to look like I have to be in this area sitting down in a meditation spot to do that. You can do it anywhere.
Yeah. It's just not my personality. Like maybe one day, you know, like just, it's not, it's not who I've been up until now. And there are things that I do for my mental and my emotional health. Like I'm sober, so I go to meetings. I love therapy, so I have a therapist. I, you know, check in with other people that are on a spiritual path so that we can exchange where we're at and get real and honest about just like what's going on and how, you know, what are we working on and what can we shift. So there are things that I consistently do that make my life better, but I don't have a particular, and I never have this world for over 10 years, and I've never ever sat every single day and done the same thing. There's always some sort of spiritual element in, and it changes, and I give myself the space for it to change, because for me, what looks spiritual for me may not be something that actually helps someone else, right? Like we all have something that works different for us. Like music for me is far more soothing than sitting down in a strict meditation practice. It's just, again, it's not my style. Also, I learned a very static way of doing meditation, which is more feminine, which was based on my Tantra lineage that I learned through my late teacher, Isadora, and her Guruji. And that path was based on more static breath work, you know, and you have your hands over your heads and you're exhaling, ha, 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 you know, like making noises and moving your body and chanting mantras. And it was just more alive, and that resonated more with me than just like, which was more of like this masculine single point focused meditation that just wasn't my thing. So I also encourage people to find what works with them and shift it as it comes along. But I definitely do want to, especially in 2021, I do want to create some more rituals that are new for me, that are new.
I like that too, because I, you know, like I do meditate every single day and journal and stuff. But then I started noticing that it was, even my journaling became like an autopilot. And I'm like, the point of doing this is to be present and to be grounded and to kind of interrupt the autopilot. And so I've been trying to like, okay, today I'm going to just run and do this for myself. And today I'm going to meditate in this way, you know, even just doing the dishes, being mindful when I'm doing the dishes. If I don't have time, or if I don't make the time to do something, it does. I love that you're saying that, because I know that I've gotten into like my own autopilot rut, just trying to do the same thing every day. But I'm like, well, I'm trying to be grounded, you know?
It's because we're trying. That's the thing. Like when you try to do the things, it takes away the fun or the magic of it. Like it has from that place of like, what do I, again, even your spiritual practice, what is it that my soul needs? Maybe that's like just taking a break, and not doing anything, right? Sometimes the most spiritual thing you could do is like watch TV, because for me, for example, I'm someone that's in my head a lot and doing a lot. And so just chilling and watching TV became self-care for me, which for someone else, they can be like, what, TV, right? Like that's not like a meditation. And it's like, yeah, I actually have, I won't say his name, but if he listens to this, he is like a big time meditator, and he watches like the most corny like reality shows. And I was so surprised what I heard, because like, I'm like, what, you're like this big time meditator, and here he is watching like Love Island and like obsessed with it. But it was because I know why, because it's so hard to just always be in that space of spirituality, that sometimes spirituality is watching that silly show that's just going to have you out of your head and relaxing. Sometimes it is baking, cookies and cooking and cleaning or getting out in nature. Like my husband, his thing is being like in nature, taking photos of people, and photo therapy is what he calls it, and that's like a meditation for him. So it doesn't have to look like one thing.
Yeah, like I could literally, so I did lashes for 13 years, and even whenever I would do lashes, I felt like it was very meditative, or like
Yes.
people find it through dance, it really through any art,
Yes. Yeah,
you
exactly.
can find it that way. So I was watching like all your videos and you doing this too. I just literally, when I watched your videos, I was bawling. Like I literally resonated so much with all the stuff that you're doing. And I love that you are sharing. There's no rules to like doing all of this stuff. And I totally like went down the rabbit hole looking at your husband's photography and your stuff too.
Yes.
And they are just making beautiful art, poetry, photography. I love it. I love everything that you're doing. So you are in Puerto Rico, and so tell me about that, and tell me how it impacted, writing this book, because I have such a, for me, like I'm Latina, but I'm also in that Latina where I speak a little Spanish, but I don't feel as confident sometimes.
Yeah.
I went to Puerto Rico 3 years ago. I grew up, like when I was little, I lived there. I was there every other summer, and then I didn't go for 6 years. And whenever I was in America, States, it's like I lost a big part of me. So I went after Hurricane Maria. I went in 2017, and there was something that the soul was
Yeah.
just telling me I got to do something for Puerto Rico. And ever since then, it's been my mission to share people in Puerto Rico, like I've done events in Puerto Rico. I did all the marketing out there in Puerto Rico. And I came across I'm like, she's in Puerto Rico too. And she was in New York.
Yeah.
How did this happen? Because I want to move there. I'm going there next week. I'm going to start looking at
Hey.
I'm excited. Like, I just want to
Awesome.
bring so much awareness to Puerto Rico being a U.S. territory.
Yeah.
And that we need to take care of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico needs it. So tell me about this journey of like you being in Puerto Rico, because you weren't always in Puerto Rico. And how did this impact your book?
Yeah, so for me, it was the opposite. I didn't grow up in Puerto Rico, right? I grew up in New York, in Brooklyn, then in Queens, and then, as a young adult everywhere in Manhattan. And then I felt to go move to Puerto Rico. And this was like in 2010, around there. I had graduated with my master's, and I was already in that process of becoming a therapist. I knew already what I wanted to do. I was already studying Tantra. I was already studying Reiki and energy work, and getting, all my favorite mystical things were coming into my life. And it said, move to Puerto Rico and connect to your roots. And so my mom is also New Yorican, born and raised in the Bronx, came from the projects. My dad
too.
yeah. And then my dad from Brooklyn. So they both didn't live in Puerto Rico. My grandparents from both sides did. So I did go in the summers, and and my grandparents were in New York when I was younger. So I had that they were speaking Spanish to me, and I was, eating my Puerto Rican foods, and the culture was in me. And I grew up in a Puerto Rican neighborhood, but I would respond in English, and I was, in New York, and just really consuming that more US kind of kind of lifestyle. And so I felt it. It was like, this is your roots. This is where your medicine lives. This is your culture. Connect to it. This is part of your journey as a spiritual teacher. And so I did that, and I moved alone, and I went, and I loved it. And I started doing my circles here, and I started connecting to the land. And for me, it felt like a soul home. It felt like this is a place where I know that I'm going to live. And I came back to New York. I ended up, working and, getting different opportunities, and then always coming back and forth, and then making the decision of like, okay, I'm going to eventually own some sort of property in Puerto Rico where I can do retreats and I can have little mini community events. Like, I had this vision that I had in my heart. And then of course, when I reconnect, because I already knew my husband, but I didn't know him in the context of dating. And so we worked on Hurricane Maria stuff together. I knew him through his social media, his photography, his poetry always spoke to me. So I had always admired his work. And then when we connected and we actually started dating, or hooking up rather, then we didn't really date, right, babe? Then I was like, okay, he lives here. He's definitely not going to live in New York full time. Like, he's not the kind of person that would live in New York like that. So I was like, okay, this is a perfect opportunity to come back. And then I moved back, and then we bought a house, which was actually his family's house in the mountains of Puerto Rico in March. So this is where we are right now. We're fixing, we're renovating, we're growing the space that will eventually, once the world is semi-normal and safe again, to do many retreats here. But connecting to the island, I think for me was part of me getting to know myself. Because like you said, right, like there's a part of us that disconnects when we are not around our culture and our people. And I think one of the biggest disadvantages of being, Commonwealth, like my political stance on that is that I wish we were in, but we're not. And so I call us like the bastard child of the United States. Like, they use us for all their resources. They use us, tax incentives for the rich, but they're not really caring about our people, right? Like, there's so many other countries that have become independent. They're fine. There's so many Latin American countries that want to help us, but we're not of like being, part of the US, but not part of the US. And so I have also learned a lot politically while living here and experiencing firsthand, not as a New Yorican, but as a Puerto Rican woman that's living here now. It's very different than being in the States and hearing information versus living and experiencing people that actually study this and live the consequences of the laws that are made, right? Because we have a president but we can serve, in the army and the Air Force, but we can't vote. So there's a whole bunch of messed up stuff. So for me, being here is also part of my giving back to myself, and also growing and learning from the community and helping exchange resources. Like we started the call, right? When you share other people's work and when you grow and share your tools, you help in some way. And I too eventually would like to give back even more. I mean, donating for me is huge, but I want to be able to give at an even bigger level. Part of me wanting, to grow my financial wealth even more is part of the big reason, is so I can give back to organizations that I really believe in on a bigger level.
Impact and influence. I love it. No,
That's right.
I have just it's like, I don't know how to explain it, but I just know that I need to be out there and I need to help. And and it's when I came across all of your stuff, I was like, I know I had to message you, because like, I want to have a retreat out there at the end of the year. Like, I want to do a lot of things out there. And like, one of my big visions is to build out hurricane proof homes out there.
And that's so, oh my God, beautiful.
Yeah, I am so excited. We definitely will be talking all about this.
Yeah, no, I mean, like when we first moved here, even just understanding like how much a roof costs, because we redid our roof, and just having an understanding of like, that's not a normal amount of money to have in your bank. Like, we were blessed because we had already been in a state of like getting access and privilege to things that not everyone has access and privilege to, right? Like, I still couldn't fathom someone like that is living in the campo, that doesn't know anything about anything because they're disconnected and they're working the lands and they're doing hard work, but in a different way, that how would they know these things?
Yeah.
How would they have access to this? It's just so horrible. And you can see then, wow, we need changes in how structures are built and how we fund things so that people can have access, so that it's not just like for the rich, right? So that's such a great project, right? And I believe that that is like your soul calling you to give back, because it's your roots. This is where you're from.
Yeah, absolutely. I just like, have y'all seen the show with Zac Efron on Netflix? It is
Oh no,
there's
but I've
it's
heard
the
that.
episode 6, it's all about Puerto Rico. And man, I started bawling when I saw that episode because it just talks about, like, the lack of support that they've had in the last few years. I mean, always for the most part, but
Yeah.
really the last few years. So the reason why I'm so passionate about I want to be able to like share as many people that are like Christine share, is like, I want to see her be as successful as possible, because I know that when she's successful, she's going to help Puerto Rico. Like her saying that,
That's
some of these
right.
people are just not educated enough. They don't know. We need people like Christine, people that do know and can make a difference in supporting, especially being a Latina in the self-development industry. I just want to be able to like help get your name out there, share your mission, share what you're doing. And also because at the end of the day, you are literally helping heal this world. Like we always say, if you want to see change, like be the change. And the only way we can do
Yeah.
it is if we start embodying it. And when we don't know how to, we don't do it. But when we have women like you that are literally sharing and using yourself as the vessel to show how it's going to change this world, we need more of that. So
Yeah, one of our friends says something like, Natalia is her name. She says like, I love my little forest. And that's like her way of describing her community. And I always think it's so cute, because it's not that people are not educated in the way, it's that they're educated in a different way, right? And that's also like another kind of mindset shift, where it's like, I'm not coming in to like save people, which is like this like colonized like mentality where it's like, I'm coming in and I know better. It's more like, people are super knowledgeable in other areas and have other resources that I don't have, right? Like thinking about that ecosystem of the forest, and I'm coming in giving the resources that I was blessed to have, and then we share it, right? And so expanding what that language even is around, like what does education mean, right? Like education is not like just going to college and go to school, but it's just being a human, right? Like I don't know how to tend to the lands, I don't know how to do these things as like a city girl, but people where we live now, we live in the campo, in the mountains in Puerto Rico, right? People here know how to do those things. So it's like this exchange of information to help each other and empower one another. And another amazing Latina woman, Ana Flores, one of my dear soul sisters, she started the company We All Grow Latina, and she says when one grows, we all grow. And so really what you're doing here is exactly that. Like we are all seeking to listen to our own individual soul call and help lift one another up so that we can all give back to the world. That's the whole point, right? Give back to our life and give back to the world.
yeah, no, I love that so much. So I had so many questions, but I don't want to like, take up too much time. I love that you also like your book. It's not, she's not saying it's an alternative to therapy. She does recommend, working with a therapist as you're doing some of this stuff. But I do love that every chapter has soul work that you can do, and,
Yes.
ceremony. So what do you mean by ceremony? I see that a lot in the book. So, for the women that are kind of new to, looking inward, what is at the end of it, what are these things that you are sharing?
Yeah, so soul work is essentially like, reflection time or questions that you can like implement and actually ground yourself into doing the work, right? So it's a prettier name for homework, but it's homework for your soul. And then, doing ceremony, we ritualize things and we do things in ritual. It helps them to stick in our subconscious more. So I mentioned in the book an example of when really healing. I wasn't sober yet. I was still acting out you know, engaging in like toxic sexual encounters when I was drinking that I always regretted afterwards. And I did this healing ceremony with someone, and she and I crafted a visual artistic representation of what that pain looked like. Because sometimes when we have that pain on the inside, we can't see it, right? It's not the same as like you leave your house dirty, you see the dishes in the sink, it's easier to see it. But sometimes we have all this emotional pain inside and we can't see it. It will manifest itself in maybe physical aches and other toxic behaviors, but it's easier to hide, so to speak. So when we're ritualizing the pain that we have inside, you can see it in 3D in front of your face. And so in this exercise, I had like condoms and I had like black tape and I like wrapped it all up. And I had this like really gruesome kind of like visual and like strings attached. It was just like this whole thing. And it was like this art piece, this ceremony that I did. And I wrote a letter to myself to tell myself that I was ready to let that go and embark on a new journey. And all of these ceremonies allowed me to ritualize moments in my life where I needed to break free from something and welcome in a new energy. And so throughout ages, we've known that these ceremonies that we do are meant to bring us into new seasons of our life. And we've disconnected from that act of ceremony. But marriage is a ceremony, right? Like baptism is a ceremony. All of these kinds of things are ceremonies. And so for me, these are more earth-based and grounded ceremonies that you can invent on your own, that you can be creative with. You can write a piece of paper and burn it, right? But essentially you're putting something into physical form to release it, to release that energy.
I know. I loved that. I love that because there's so much stuff that we carry and we're just so unaware of what it actually is until like we make it, you know, a visual representation. So yeah. Oh my gosh. And do you have a mentor? I noticed that you say, her name is Christine or no, Pincola, something like that. You
Oh,
mentioned it a
Clarissa.
lot.
Yeah. So I love one of my like soul guides, I think. Her name is Clarissa Pincola Estes, and she's Dr. Clarissa Pincola Estes. And she is the author of Women Who Run with the Wolves. And I got to study with her in person, and I call her book like a woman's Bible. She's just like next level. She's just amazing. And so I came across her work. It deeply impacted me. I got to study with her in person, and I absolutely loved it. And I loved the impact that she had in my work as a therapist and just as a healer. I've had many mentors along the way. One of them who is now not here in this physical plane, her name was Psalm Isadora. And that was like my Tantra, one of my two Tantra teachers. I then was introduced to Amma, not the hugging saint Amma, but another Amma. Venu is her name, and she's from India, and she also studies from the lineage of Tantra that I'm from, which is Sri Vidya Tantra. And so her and her husband taught me more of the like ancient rituals and mantras that are only passed down through like guru to student. And then I have my therapist mentor, who's Terry Cole. And so she really was the one that paved the way for me in terms of teaching me how to be abundant as a therapist, and also clinical skill sets that were more coaching, mixing coaching with therapy as a licensed psychotherapist, because she is also a licensed psychotherapist. So I've had many mentors. Those are the main ones that I would consider my mentors and my influences. And spirit has given me, the outline of my work.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Do you teach any of these things, or like the Tantra and all the things that you do? Do you teach them now, or do you just, what is like the main thing that you mentor on?
So it's interesting because like I don't teach people like I would say like my mystical kind of like more the work that makes up the body of the work that I teach. I don't teach it to other people as of yet. Like I will eventually do some sort of Diosa certification where I train people on my method to help them, which basically is not something new, but it's something that's done with the perspective of mixing different influences that I've done, so that people can get access to that, you know, in the future. But I personally don't teach like on tantra or on shamanism, because I don't consider myself a tantra teacher or a shaman per se. I consider myself more a licensed therapist who is a healer and that does women's empowerment work, mostly for Latina women, but really all people that end up crossing my path. So I currently do my work by providing the Diosa retreat, which is coming up on its 9th annual year. My mentorship for other spiritual women that want to have a business in the world and make money and make impact through my Diosa mastermind. Some self-study courses like healing love addiction, and you know, speaking collaborations, things like that. Obviously my book, and then most recently my community, my online community, that really that's going to be my focus in expanding, which is the Diosa Hood, which is a global community of women that gather online and in person if they end up meeting up online to connect even further, to really hold space for one another. We have workshops from me, from other experts. You know, we do meditation, we talk about full moon ceremonies, we talk about healing childhood trauma, we talk about manifesting healthy love, like all these kind of different topics. And so it's really like a sisterhood for us. And so that is my main focus, and just really continuing to show up in these ways by helping people to heal from trauma, rise in their worth, and then also for the people that have already risen in their worth, that are ready to take this healing to the world, to teach them how to do it. And so that's where I'm at right now.
Thank you so much. I love everything that you're doing. Keep on doing it. Like, you are doing big things, like so powerful. So please keep on doing that. Where can everyone find you?
Yeah, you can find all my work at christineg.tv and on Instagram at Cosmic Christine. And if you want to try out the Diosa Hood membership, there's a 1-week free trial, and you could just go directly to thediosahood.com. But all the details are on my website. You can find out all about it there. And yeah, such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. And y'all, the book, I Am Diosa. I'm almost
so
done.
Cute.
I'm like, it's so
yeah,
good.
and it's an audiobook too. So for those of you that are not readers, I always tell people I personally like the audiobook better, and I narrate it. So it's really special that it's my voice, so you can hear my soul coming through. So definitely check out the book, I Am Diosa.
Yes. Get all of the cosmic energy from Christine.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. Make
You're
sure you are
welcome.
following her. Check out all her stuff. Check out her book. And let's just keep on lifting up our Latina sisters.